and welcome to Billy Bob's Punk / Ska Album of the Month. For the month of September 2023, I chose to feature the Dwarves Must Die. Fucking great Dwarves album. Fucking full of all sorts of great songs all over the fucking place. I love that album. I was lucky enough to get a hold of Blag, and we discussed the whole Dwarves history. This interview is full of a bunch of fucking great information. I do want to note that I was really nervous during this one for some reason, and when I get nervous, I say the word fuck a lot. So there's a lot of fuckings coming up in this interview. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, make some comments, do all that other fucking bullshit. But we're going to jump into this interview. Enjoy. How'd you first get into fucking music?
Well, I started off playing in a band. I started playing, I guess my first gig was when I was in high school. We played at the Cubby Bear Lounge downtown Chicago. Must have been about 83, maybe 82. So I was 16, 17 and started playing in clubs.
Was this with Suburban Nightmare? Or was there a different project?
Yeah. No, Suburban Nightmare was the group, that I had in high school, and then a couple years later it morphed into the Dwarves.
Fucking word. So your first release was the Hard Day's Night. Was that still when you were still based in Chicago?
It was called Hard Day's Nightmare.
Nightmare. Yeah.
The Suburban Nightmare EP, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fuck yeah. What can you tell me? Was that your first experience in a studio? What was that like?
I was one of the first. I think we went out to Champaign, Illinois, which is a couple hours downstate. Adrian Ballou, I think, had a place where he would set up down there. He was a great, well-known guitar player who'd played with Zappa and some people like that, and King Crimson, and he so we went to that studio and we recorded with a guy named Willie Wells, I think his name was. So yeah, we were doing a lot of 60s garage kind of covers, obscure songs from Pebbles and Nuggets and those kind of comp records, and wound up making the Nightmare record down there.
Shit, yeah, that's fucking interesting. I didn't know there was a King Crimson connection. How did it morph into the Dwarves? How did that go down?
I think I always wanted to have a band with kind of a 60s name like that. And we just didn't live in the suburbs anymore. We moved to the big city, so it was like, fuck, let's get a new name. So we came up with a new one and we recorded a batch of new shit, but it was still pretty 60s garage oriented kind of stuff,
Horror Stories, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, Horror Stories was that next record, and that had a bunch of originals as well as a bunch of kind of obscure 60s covers on it. And eventually years later we made a compilation called Lick It, which has sort of all that early stuff on it. It has the Horror Stories record by the Dwarves and the Hard Day's Nightmare by the Nightmare, and a bunch of singles and different things. I Want to Kill Your Boyfriend and a few. I'm not sure if that one's on there, but it's a lot of our kind of 60s stuff that's on that early comp record, Lick It.
Lick It, that was 99 from Recess Records, if I recall.
Right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, now we just reprint it through our label Greedy.
Word.
Give me the things that drive me insane. Teenage women and freak cocaine. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a horror stories. That was a great start to your fucking career, and then you followed it up with Toolin' for a Warm Teabag.
Yes, the classic. Yeah, John Strauss did that illustration, the same guy who had done the Skull and Boners illustration, and he was a buddy of ours from high school. And yeah, so we made actually first we made Lucifer's Crank and then Toolin', and they were all kind of recorded around the same time, and it was the same songs, but we kind of had different versions of them, I guess. So again, there's a later compilation that came out called Free Cocaine, and that has everything from Lucifer's Crank and Toolin' for a Warm Teabag and a bunch of singles that came out at that time. So sort of Lick It is kind of the 60s version of it, and then Free Cocaine is kind of the early punk rock version, sort of all the stuff before Blood, Guts, and Pussy.
Word.
Hey, I'm a motherfucker now, yes I must admit. She made a TV dinner and she made me come on in. That hair was out of 10, since I was a school. I made it inside and make it 1943.
Does which one of them? Does either one of them include "We Kill Cockthrobbin'," the rare cassette?
You know what? The songs are on the Free Cocaine stuff from We Kill Cockthrobbin', and you know, I'm not positive because I haven't listened to it in a while. I'm not sure if those versions, I think maybe the versions on the cassette are also slightly different than the ones that are on Lucifer's Crank or Toolin'. I think we recorded the same songs like a number of times around that era, you know, or it's some of the same ones and some of them are different or something. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it getting that cassette because it trades hands for like $600 and $700, you know. Yeah. And I'm not sure if there's really anything different on there, but I know they're worth a lot just because it's very obscure. And then at a certain point, somebody reprinted them. And I don't think those are worth anything, but it's easy to get confused, you know.
Word. Because I was just curious where the fuck I would ever fucking be able to hear that shit. Because, like you said, it goes for fucking $700 online. Where the fuck am I gonna find that kind of money?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's up with that. I suppose I should put it on a comp at some point. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah. Fucking the coveted rare fucking Dwarves cassette.
Yeah.
So yeah, then you ended up on fucking Sub Pop. How'd the fuck that go down?
Well, we had gone up there to play a gig. I guess they were having their first kind of festival thing, and so they booked a few nights, and we opened for Tad one night. And you know, Sub Pop kind of had a thing then called the Singles Club. So you'd go in and record a couple songs for them to put out for this subscription only 7-inch thing. But when we went in to record, we recorded so many songs that Jack Endino, who was recording for them, said, "Hey, these guys have a whole record's worth of shit. You might as well do a record with them." So then we went back and we actually recorded the complete Blood Guts record up there. And so that was sort of what caused it. You know, we were pretty efficient in the studio. And so they gave us a shot.
Talk about a fucking classic ass record. Blood, Guts, and Pussy. Fucking, what do you remember the most about that fucking time frame? Because, like I said, it's fucking classic shit.
We recorded it up in Seattle with Jack Endino, and the lineup was Vaj Moore on drums, Saltpeter on bass, and He Who Cannot Be Named on guitar, and then me singing. Well, what's interesting now about that is that I reacquired all those records from Sub Pop, so there was Blood, Guts, and Pussy and Thank Heaven and Sugar Fix, and I've now reprinted them with bonus tracks and everything and bonus art. So they're actually kind of cooler now to have. But that first session that we did when we first went up there, I found all that material and we remixed that. So I'm going to put out, with all kinds of pictures that Charles Peterson and Michael Levine had done for the original. I'm going to include a bunch of those pictures, and I'm just going to put out this sort of alternate Blood, Guts, and Pussy thing. We're going to call it Sunshine, Lollipops, and Rainbows. So
shit,
pretty funny shit, and it should be great, for people who love that record. It really gives you a different window into it, because this was kind of a live version that we did in the studio. I was just set up live to sing, so there's no overdubs on it at all. It's just that was what we sounded like live, So pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. That's fucking awesome.
Sing with a friend of mine. Sing with a friend of mine. Did not see why, but at all times sing. If a friend of great vibes above. Great vibes above. They call me great vibes above. You're a friend of mine. You're a friend of mine.
The copy I had back in the day had Thank Heavens for Little Girls and Sugar Fix on one disc.
Yeah, they did that years later. They threw those two releases together on a 7-inch, or I'm sorry, on a CD, and then they took it out of print, both as an LP and a CD, so you couldn't get it anywhere. They had that stuff out of print for decades. So I'm glad it's all back in print and you can get it, and I don't have to deal with a bunch of fucking dipshits.
Shit yeah.
Where that would go. Everybody knows you only can trust us as far as you can throw. Everywhere that we go, yeah. Everybody knows what they know, yeah,
But then after Sugar Fix, you were a busy fucking guy between 93 and 97. Let's see, in 94 you did you released Let's Take a Ride as a single, a solo. What inspired that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Dwarves, it had kind of ended. We felt prematurely, we weren't making records for Sub Pop anymore. And, I just said, well, shit, I'll just go solo. But it was still the same group, so it didn't really make any sense to go solo. And by the time we recorded another full length, I had made that solo EP, and I had also made a bluegrass record called Earl Lee Grace Bluegrass, and or Blackgrass, that's right. And so I made a couple solo things, but I was like, fuck this, and when I got a hold of the Epitaph guys to make another record, which wound up being Young and Good Looking, which was sort of our most popular record, so by that time I just put it out as the Dwarves again, figuring it'd be easier to get shows and move around and do stuff, so that was when Young and Good Looking emerged.
The Dwarves are young and good looking. The Dwarves are young and good looking. The Dwarves are young and good looking.
Young and Good Looking is a fucking great album. That was the first one I acquired. It took me a minute to hunt down. I lived in a fucking small redneck town, right? We didn't have a CD store, and you'd have to travel at least 30 fucking minutes to go and buy a CD. Then you'd show up, and they didn't just have fucking Blood, Guts, and Pussy sitting out on the fucking
right, yeah.
So it took me a while to acquire all these fucking albums, but Young and Good Looking was the first one I acquired, and it was a fucking great album. Tell me a bit about that one.
Yeah, I mean, people really like that one. It was sort of when 90s kind of pop punk music hit the mainstream, and I had always had a bunch of songs like that. I mean, the Dwarves kind of veered from a pop punk kind of Ramones-y quality to a more hardcore kind of quality, and Young Good Looking had a lot of the poppy stuff like Everybody's Girl and One Time Only, and then it had some rock and roll stuff like You Gotta Burn. It was a good kind of well-rounded record, and I was starting to play around more with sound effects and drum looping and stuff that was sort of coming up at the time. So it turned out to be a fairly groundbreaking record, and it got us a deal with Epitaph. They signed us based off that eventually, and so it was a good time to kind of cash in. Everybody was doing, that kind of music was sort of popular with people. And that was also when I met Eric Valentine, who turned out to be a big influence on me. He became a huge producer and helped me produce that record and the subsequent ones,
Yeah, that was a great record.
The bright lights hit my eyes like a fist. I knew where I was. I guess I'd always known. There are no secret destinations, no cruel twists of fate. My ancestors were given to extraterrestrial dalliance, which explained the dual citizenship of my respiratory system and my love of a good time. What it didn't explain was what now.
Actually, the same year, you wrote a book that fucking year, Armed to the Teeth with Lipstick.
Yeah, so Armed to the Teeth with Lipstick was kind of a surreal, weird kind of word salad kind of a book. It's sort of hard to understand, but I had my friend Mad Mark Rude illustrate it. Mark Rude was a well-known kind of San Diego punk rock illustrator, and he'd done like Misfits and Offspring records and different stuff. So we brought him into the fold, and he helped me make that book. Unfortunately, he died a few years later, but we are going to reprint that book finally. It's been out of print for a long time, and again, it goes for a lot. But my friends at Rare Bird, which is a press down in LA, are going to reprint that, and they also reprinted Nina, which was a book that I wrote, and they printed my newest book, which was called Highland Falls. And all my books are kind of dirty books, a lot of sex and violence and weirdness in it. They're not really about. Most guys from bands write a book about their band or whatever, but my books are more like sex and drugs books.
And then in 2000, you released Come Clean. That was a fucking great release. Tell me a bit about that one.
Yeah, I mean, Come Clean, we were kind of starting to figure out what you could do with Pro Tools and, what you could do with sort of guests and stuff. That's the first one where Nick Oliveri sings and brings a song in, and, some interesting stuff happened on that one. It was, we finally had a little bit of cash, and we were getting some interesting stuff done. And so, by that point, it was, I think we were kind of going on all cylinders. We made what I thought was a really cool record, but then Epitaph just dropped us immediately. So that we didn't really know where to go from there, but we were pretty happy with the records that we'd made and the shows we were playing. So, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but, we were like, okay, and we just kept making records and touring after that. And from that point on, we sort of ignored record labels for the most part. They didn't, by that time, I think we were sort of past 30, and, record labels aren't really interested in you much past that time period. And, I started to see the limits of what they could do for you. They don't really do much. They just kind of wait around, see who gets lucky kind of thing.
Word. So you just fucking took it on yourself.
Fuck one in the basement, I fuck one in the hall. Fuck one on a toilet seat in a bathroom stall. Fuck one in an alley, right up against the wall. I fuck them all.
And then the following year, did you re-record all them tracks on How to Win Friends and Influence People? Because that was a fucking great.
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. I mean, we were getting a lot of play on like MTV shows. Like that was when the reality shows were coming up, like Jackass and Viva La Bam. And 16 and Pregnant or whatever. I just had all kinds of songs in there. And so we re-recorded a bunch of songs that other labels owned just so I'd have them to use in case somebody wanted it. And then that record came out on Reptilian, which was a buddy of mine from Baltimore. So that was sort of the reason for re-recording that. And by that time, I guess Gnarly Watts had come in, Vag had left the band, and Gregor was Gnarly Watts was the drummer then, and then I guess it was Nick Oliveri was playing bass as Rex Everything. And then the guitar was Mark Diamond, who the Fresh Prince of Darkness. So we had some personnel changes around that time, and the sound sort of changed, and some interesting things happened. But a lot of people like that record because we kind of re-recorded its stuff a little faster and harder than it had been previously. Usually people do stuff a little weaker and wimpier, So How to Win Friends came off pretty well.
Yeah, it was fucking great. It was great. Like you said, some of the songs were faster. It had a lot more energy than the original fucking cuts of those tracks.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. Fucking Dwarves always have energy, though. What the fuck am I talking about?
I wanna fuck, eat, and fuck you up. Yeah, I paid in love, but that ain't enough. I wanna fuck, eat, and fuck you up.
In 2004, the Dwarves Must Die. Were you planning on killing the dwarves? Was that what was going on? That was a fucking.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that time, when it was starting to swirl around more, like, oh, we should be done with this. This is kind of reaching the end of its thing. But what happened there was that, my mind kind of went to this place, and I made this very interesting kind of sprawling produced record with a huge amount of guests. Everybody from guys like San Quinn and DJ Mars that were like Bay Area hip hop guys, to like, Nash from Urjo Rakill, that was an old buddy of mine, and even Dexter Holland from The Offspring comes in and sings on that record. There's really a bunch of interesting people, a bunch of interesting songs, and I kind of, by that time, a lot of the stuff that Eric Valentine had taught me had sort of rubbed off, and there was a lot of big production on that record. And it was interesting because I think it was the greatest thing we had done up to that point, but I think it was so far out of our wheelhouse, and there were so many songs that were different, and people didn't really know what to make of that one, especially with like kind of a hip hop influence and some other things. I mean, it was still very much a punk record. We never went like, yo, here's my baseball cap on the side and we're all trying to act hip hop. I mean, it was more like plugging that way of making records in, you looping things, but from weird old 60s records, and doing all these kind of revolutionary techniques. So I really stand behind Must Die. I think it's a pretty interesting record.
I fucking love it. I like how between Young and Good Looking and Must Die, there's such a variety of music within the fucking Dwarves. Like, you got all over the place, especially when you got to that one. It was a fucking great record.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, rock and roll records were really starting to get lame, and really hip hop records were more interesting at that time. And I just wasn't getting really turned on by rock records that I heard much, and so it was time to kind of sprawl into some interesting other venues,
Oh, bitch, I love you. Won't you run away with me? Oh, bitch, I need you more than anyone can see. Oh, I love it if you're leaving. Love it if you stay. Bitch, I love you. Won't you let me run away?
After that, I think I made another solo record, which was called Candy Now. That was, I gave it a band name, and it was me and a female singer, a woman named Angelina, who came from she was actually from Russia, and she had a group called Persephone's Bees with a guy named Tom Ayers. And I was very into that group and thought they were a great kind of almost like psychedelic international pop kind of group, much different than the Dwarves, you know. So I plugged them into making that Candy Now record and kind of looked around for some different stuff to do.
Let's just get high and fuck some sluts. Do what we will, not what we must. Forever stuck in Cuban lust. So what? Let's just get high and fuck some sluts.
But eventually, you know, the Dwarves returned. I wrote a song called Let's Just Get High and Fuck Some Sluts. And I just thought, this is such a perfect Dwarf song. Like, I have to do one more Dwarves record around this. And so we made a record called The Dwarves Are Born Again, which was like our return from after Must Die. And that it had been like 7 or 8 years, I think. So there was another record. So there was a lot of, you know, and by that time we played a lot live. We had done Europe several times by then, and we had kind of, you know, morphed into more like a live unit. And we just played a lot. And so, you know, that Born Again was kind of a continuation of Must Die. Like, can you do lots of different genres? And we sort of still had kind of noise and you know, hardcore and punk genres, and we sort of added back in the old garage rock that we'd started at, and we started putting in kind of stuff with Farfisa organ and garagey drum beats and different kind of stuff. And that was sort of like a full circle or back around record with Born Again, you know, and it was punk rock, but it was a lot of different genres, you know, more like Must Die. And I think that's where we've sort of settled, you know, we always cut in lots of different genres and stuff. I mean, it's basically a punk band, but you just sort of go a lot of different places on a Dwarves record.
Yeah, you don't want to be limited. You guys aren't limited. That's what I fucking love about the Dwarves.
The Dwarves concept album.
But yeah, that 7 years hiatus was the longest between albums. Which though you're at 5 years now, you're starting to get quite the gap.
I know. Well, we made a great record, which is called the Dwarves Concept Album. And the Dwarves Concept Album is going to be coming out. Let me see if I don't have a cover here, but I got some album art that I got.
So I hadn't got to it yet, but there is a new Dwarves album about to come out.
Yeah, see, there you go. Quick peek at the cover.
Fuck yeah.
And it's, you know, the Dwarves Concept Album. So it should be fun.
You know, I'm going to freeze that and get the whole fucking track list.
Got the nudity, got the track list. Yeah, have some fun with it. But yeah, don't put the cover out yet. We'll let people wait a minute before they get the full thing. But yeah, it's a very interesting, sprawling record again with lots of different genres and lots of songwriters. I mean, you know, Nick Oliveri wrote several songs. Fresh Prince of Darkness wrote several songs. Josh Freese has a song in there. Saltpeter came back. He plays in there and has songs. So, you know, that's kind of the most fun part of it, is that the Dwarves, and I think part of how the records stay interesting is that it's not just me and what I write. You know, I sort of produce it and, you know, have the overview on it, but it's really, you know, everybody in this band writes songs and they write great lyrics too. So there's really a lot of, you know, I think that's what limits most bands or makes them kind of make a repetitive record or a record like their last one, just because it's all one guy doing it. And, you know, the Dwarves have always been really interesting with different people and different people playing. Snoop Hawk, our new drummer, you know, he plays a lot of like speed metal-y kind of stuff and thrash stuff with his band Get a Grip, you know, so I threw elements of that in this new record, and, you know, just to try and get everybody on there and get different people playing. And, you know, Josh Freese plays on it. He played a lot on our last few records, and that's kind of neat. Now he's gone to the Foo Fighters. And so, you know, there's a whole like brain trust of the Dwarves. Make pretty interesting record.
Shit yeah.
Wake up and get high with me. You didn't come here to sleep. tell me you can stay up late and get up and get high with me. Get high, get high, get high with me. Get high, get high, get high with me.
Let's talk about Invented Rock and Roll, the 2014 album. That was a fucking pretty good album.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of saw that as a return to form. I mean, it came out on Recess Records, which were my buddies from like FYP and Toys That Kill, and I had produced stuff for them in the 90s. And so they put that record out, and it was, I think we tracked it at Brant from Caius's place. He had just opened a studio, and we went out there and recorded some, and yeah, that one, and then Take Back the Night, which was the one after that came out in 2018, were both, they're a little more gut level. They don't have as much of the crazy genre jumping. There's a little bit of sound effects and different stuff. I think that's kind of baked in now. But both of those records, Dwarves Invented Rock and Roll and Take Back the Night, were a little more straightforward rock and roll, some more kind of mid-tempo rock and roll. They kept that garage element on some songs, a little bit of hardcore, you know. But so for this one, the concept album, which was sort of like the post-pandemic record, we just had a shitload of songs. There was so much material that we made more of a sprawling, like we kind of considered this sort of like our white album or like our double album, you know, it's kind of that kind of thing.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
I'm getting it on with your mom when you're gone in the morning. Getting it on with your mom in the John late at night.
Ralph Champagne.
Yeah, so that was part of why there was a long pause here, was that I really decided to make a solo record that was very listenable and kind of produced and kind of played up that other side of me that's more kind of crooning and doing old-fashioned music, you know. So like, you know, it was that same idea as like Candy Now, where you're hopping around genres, but instead of with all the hard genres like the Dwarves with like, you know, speed metal and gangster rap and hardcore punk and all that stuff, it's more like Ralph Champagne is more jumping around the genres of like country, 60s garage and you know, like acoustic stuff and novelty songs and humor. And so I made a lot of videos to go with those. We kind of put a lot of work into the videos that came out really interesting. You know, we had a song called Lolita Goodbye, which was a funny song about me falling in love with a young chick's mom. And then there was a song called Contraband, which was a great kind of trucker epic on there. You know, and you know, it sort of combined like the verse of Convoy with the chorus of Eastbound and Down. You know, it was a catchy kind of trucker thing. And so we made a video of that with these Ukrainian animators, two sisters called the Mad Twins. And they make great videos, you know, and they've made them for punk bands like Bouncing Souls and NoFX and Social D and stuff like that. So, you know, we threw him on this country thing, and that came out really interesting. So, yeah, you know, Ralph Champagne, pretty worthwhile record.
Yeah, it was fun shit.
Nina West rode a bicycle in spite of the virtues of physical fitness. Though to drive was the dream of every suburban something-year-old, she preferred to pedal or hitchhike as the mood struck her. It was a mood that changed as often and as maddeningly as the definition of virtue itself.
And you did release another book last year, Highland Falls, around the same time period as the Ralph Champagne.
Yeah, that's right. And so, yeah, I was pretty creative during the pandemic. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of slowed down, but I just kept writing and making records and doing stuff, trying to, you know, I knew it would end eventually, and, you know, you need some material out there. So that's kind of, I think we've finally come full circle with that, with the concept record. It's going to be out in mid-November. And so that's sort of like a lot. I've put out a lot of material really over the last few years, you know, and if you include the books and the solo record and all the videos and all that stuff. So.
You're a busy fucking guy. Yeah, so
I try and stay busy, you know. I mean, what the fuck?
How fucking great was that shit? New Dwarves album? It's gonna be fucking great. It's gonna be great. He did show me the cover, and I did intentionally not put it in there. Sorry, guys. I've seen it. You haven't. But, like I said, full of great information. Great information. I hope you enjoyed it. You can keep tabs on that new album because it's going to be out soon. I'm going to put some links to their website and all that shit in the bio, whatever. I hope you really fucking enjoyed that shit. Like, subscribe, do all that bullshit. I'll catch you next month.